In this video, I want to introduce you to React and go over the core concepts I think every React developer should aim to learn and master. When it came to putting this concept together, I selected them based on things we need to build out most of the functionalities that you see in websites today, and things somebody interviewing you will probably expect you to know. But before we get started, I'm Vincent Ezekiel, a full stack developer tutor at Odunride. I want to quickly introduce you to our full stack development class, where you will learn from our certified and experienced tutor who will guide you in your journey regardless of the level of experience you have in tech. To register and start your career in tech, check the link in the description of the video, or you can simply go to our website at www.odunride.com. See you in class. What is React? React is a JavaScript library for building out user interface. When you look at websites like Facebook, Netflix, and Airbnb, you are looking at UI built in React. So React basically provides us with a set of tools and structure for building out this user interface and makes this process much easier and faster. Single page applications. With React, it is very common to build out simple page applications. So before we get into these React concepts, I want to quickly recap single page application and how they work for anybody that is not familiar with this concept yet. So in a traditional website, we have a template for each page on our website and return that template back to the user whenever they request it. With single page application, however, we are working with one single template and are simple updating all the components within the DOM personally. Components are what basically make up our visual layer of our application and splitting up our UI into independent reusable pieces, while how you build and structure your application is completely up to you. Traditionally, each part of our UI would be built out separately as its own component and added into a parent component, making up the UI for a specific page. A component is a JavaScript class or function that returns back some HTML. Well, this is something called JSX, which means JavaScript XML. But more on that in a second. One thing to note about a component is that they can be nested as deep as you want. A component can hold another component, and that component can hold more components. While I do think you should learn both class components and function-based components at some point, with the addition of React hook, the trend is shifting more towards using functional components. So if you are probably trying to decide which to learn first, you can probably start with functional components. JSX. Instead of writing traditional HTML tags, you are going to be using something called JSX, which stands for JavaScript XML. JavaScript XML actually look a lot like HTML with some slight syntax differences and also give us some added functionality. Take a look at this example and you will see how you can use curly braces to pass in variables and add in JavaScript logic directly into your HTML. JSX tags are actually very similar to HTML tags. Some notable differences are things like class declaration, which are written as class name, and how event handlers are added. Browsers can't actually read JSX, so this code will actually be run through a compiler and it converts it into traditional HTML and JavaScript code once it has put in the browser. React router. Using a React router is how we can have multiple pages in a single page application. With React, we can typically handle URL routing with something called a router that keeps our UI in synchronizing with a URL. Because you are not actually changing the pages, the job of the router is to take care of the rendering out components into the DOM based on the current URL. Props. When you need to pass data down from one component to another, you can pass it down as a prop. A prop can be passed down like a function parameter. So once a prop is passed down into a component, you can now use that prop anywhere in the child components. Prop can pass down multiple layers if needed. The term for this is called prop drilling. Prop drilling can get messy, so we'll talk about some solutions to this in a minute. State. State is simply a JavaScript object used to represent information in or about a particular component. Traditionally, we use class-based components to set our state and its values, but more modernly, we use React hook like useState to create a component state. So let's imagine for a second that we have a list of nodes that we want to render out to in our app. We can set an initial state and then map through that state and output all that data in our components. So basically, you need to have it in mind that we can also update our state. In this example, we can set our initial state as an empty array, then we request some data from our API and update that state with new data. This state update will trigger our component lifecycle effects, which we'll talk about next. The component lifecycle. Understanding the component lifecycle is a must for every React developer and is probably one of the most common interview questions for junior developer. A React component has a lifecycle that it goes through, and there are three main phases that we need to know about in this lifecycle. Each component has a mounting phase for when it's first being added to the DOM, an updating phase for when we are modifying something and that component needs to update, and an unmounting phase for when this component will be removed from the DOM. With class components, we have these three methods to take care of this life cycle. So basically, the cycle method we have are components did mount, components did update, and components will unmount. With function components, however, we have a method called useEffects, which allow us to work with each part of the component's lifecycle. React hooks. React hooks only apply to functional components, but due to the popularity of using function-based component hooks, have become more essential to learn in this process. Hooks let us add states and other features without using class-based components. Before hooks, functional components could not hold any states. Hooks are simply functions that allow us to hook into and manage states. The two most common hooks that you'll probably be using when you first start are going to be a useState, which lets us set and update our states in a component, and useEffects. This is simply a function that allows us to manage our component lifecycle. React gives us a whole list of built-in hooks, along with the ability to create your own custom hooks. State management, where we can create and manage states inside our React components. There will likely be a time when we need to create some sort of global state to make data available across multiple components. Think of something like holding data for a logged in user. You may need this user across multiple components like your header bar or a profile component, and passing this data down through props, especially when this information is updated somewhere inside of those components. We have several options to handle this, like using the built-in context API or using a third-party package like Redux and many others. With this, we are able to create some forms of global states and use it across multiple components in our component tree without having to deal with props drilling. Coming down to the last concept of the introduction to React. If you find this video helpful, kindly subscribe and like, and if you have any question in mind, kindly drop it at the comment box. So basically, the last concept of the introduction to the React, we have the common commands. So there are three basically common commands every React developer must know. It is compulsory. So while there are other commands you need to know, but these are the three basically main commands you need to know. The create React app, the start my app, and the run build. So the create React app basically creates our React application. It creates our React application templates for us. Then it is basically the React application we are going to be editing and modifying to build our web application, our web page. Then the second command we have is the start command. So the start command basically starts our React application. So, and in order to start our React application, we can simply go to our command prompt and type npm start. So by typing that command, we basically start our React application. Then the third command we have is a run build. So we have the run build command that builds the directory for a production build of our application for deployment. So once we are ready for deployment, the run build is one responsible for building our React application for deployment. Alright, so that is the introduction to React and my list of core concepts every React developer should master. Don't forget to subscribe and like. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out the link in the description of the video, which will direct you to our website so you can get started your career in tech. See you in class.